PodSham Pod.
Welcome back to the PodSham Pod. We're about a dozen games into the 22-23 NBA season. We don't deliver consistent episodes because I am overwhelmed by my MFA program. But guess what? We're back. And we've got some good hard-hitting segments for you today. Max, how are you?
I'm good. I feel like trying to understand the NBA season right now is a little bit like trying to drink out of the fire hose. There's just so much going on. There's a lot of teams. I'm doing well. I'm trying to ingest as much information and content as I can, but it's difficult.
Yeah. In a state of so much uncertainty, I thought we should just start with a really lame, just dunk on your recent takes that you think have panned out pretty well. We're just going to call this I Told You So before we start the meat of this episode. And so I just wrote down a few things I want to say, fuck you, I was right about. I told you so about Donovan Mitchell. On our second episode of this podcast several months ago, it's our most listened to episode. We're not allowed to say numbers. The sponsors don't allow us to. But on our second episode, I went on a long-ass rant about how I would be shopping for Donovan Mitchell because of the negative rhetoric surrounding him after that really awful Mavs series. I just was looking at his playoff resume, big moments he had in the bubble, and like just his pedigree, the fact that he'd gotten better year after year, and he's right now his current contract has him locked down until the age of 30, and he's well in his physical prime, and he just gets better every year, and his work ethic seems absolutely elite. And here he is, averaging north of 30 points, leading a Cavs team without Darius Garland for the early part of this season, and looking like a surefire All-NBA guy. And so, yeah, I feel vindicated there. I'm not going to say anything crazy like he's in the MVP conversation yet, because I just don't think he's going to be there in 30 games when some of his usage goes to Garland. But Mitchell's really fucking good. He's just a guy who's going to be an all-star a lot of times in his career. I don't know what the ceiling of this Cavs team is until Evan Mobley has a chance to become the best player on the team, which I think, you know, if you're a Cavs fan, you hope will happen within the next few years. I'm not sure how much this changes the way I see Donovan Mitchell. I think it just validates the feelings I had about him. And I thought he was catching way too much flack after last year's playoffs.
Yeah, he's absolutely blowing the doors off teams right now early in the season. He's got a career high in virtually every offensive statistic to this point. You would imagine the efficiency will probably come down a little bit to his career averages, because right now, instead of 45% from the field, he's over 50. Instead of 36% from threes at 45. So a lot of that stuff will probably come down, but the way he's playing, his intensity, just the way that he's really seamlessly fit into Cleveland, where we see some of these other teams that made moves over the summer that are trying to reacclimate guys, it can take some time to sort of feel out. Cleveland has absolutely just hit the ground running already with 2 big wins over Boston, as well as just having a top record in the Eastern Conference. Yeah, that's a good one.
32, 4, and 6. PER is 25.5. He's shooting 45% from 3 on high volume, 86% from the line. Absurd numbers. And like we've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast, like Donovan Mitchell, despite his height, is not a small guard. Like he has legitimate like 2 size. And so it's the scariest thing about the Mavs series last year was how much of an Olay curtain he was on defense. And he hasn't been that guy so far. A lot of people have talked about how he's grinding on defense like maybe he hasn't since his rookie year. So that's really encouraging too, maybe even more than the offensive explosion, because we knew he was an amazing offensive player.
Absolutely.
So yeah, really exciting times for Cleveland, and even scarier times for the Lakers as LeBron looks over at his hometown. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Give me something you told me about that's working out for you.
I mean, I was far from the only person on this island, but just the absolute Giannis revenge domination tour that we've been seeing. Raw averages, Papa Giannis, raw averages of about 32 points a game, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, PER of 32, which is just ridiculous. If PER like 20 is good, 30 is kind of like historically unheard of. And he's also doing it in like 32 minutes a game. People always try to hold the minutes argument against him for MVP, which I never really understand. They're like, oh, I remember back 2 years ago, or maybe it was last year, they were like, oh, Giannis doesn't play that many minutes. If he's putting up this kind of production in this few minutes, you're winning because he doesn't
Yeah.
have to play the whole time.
Yeah,
And
if he's getting you that production, I just want to know like what the numbers would look like if he had like a prime LeBron minutes season where he's going like 38 minutes a night. But
yeah,
but also, if I were a Bucks fan, I'd be really happy that they're running the system the way they are with it and keeping his legs as fresh as possible heading into a playoff run. Okay, next,
yeah.
we're moving on. We're moving on from Giannis. All right, he's the
Okay.
Ballon d'Or. He's the best player in the world.
Yes. All
Um,
right.
okay.
I feel like we might have both had my next one, so let me do my next
right.
one.
Fuck, you do it.
You were harder on this. Minnesota, we were very skeptical. You were very skeptical. I was skeptical. I think I ended up putting them as my 8th seed in my standings projections, which seemed weird after they were the 7th seed last year and added Rudy Gobert. But just with how much better the rest of the West got, it didn't make a ton of sense to me that people were saying this could be a 50-plus win team in the regular season. And the other thing, when I was doing my top players list, is I saw a lot of lists that had Anthony Edwards getting up towards like that 20th best player in the NBA. And I was like, okay, I know he had a great playoffs. He's really exciting, but let's just hold off a little bit because his decision-making can still really wax and wane. And defensively, he shows flashes, but he can also kind of fall asleep. And what we've seen thus far from Minnesota has been a lot of confusion. Sort of, it looks like they have these two different identities going on between Gobert and Towns. And they've had some bad losses. Their record doesn't look terrible because they've fattened up on some bad teams, but it does not look great thus far.
Yeah. We're almost getting to the point where I'm gonna like go snag some Anthony Edwards stock. NBA University, great Twitter follow, posted they post like hilarious polls like this guy or this guy. And they had like a group of players under a certain age. And within this age group, Ben Mathurin was getting more votes than Anthony Edwards after like it was like right after the why aren't you dunking interview. But yeah, Ant I mean, it isn't Ant's game I'm worried about. It's between the ears what's happening with that team, in that locker room. His body language is not great. I think like I don't want to like say, hey, I told you Rudy Gobert wasn't a good trade for them because I didn't see a ton of people lauding them for giving up so much for Rudy Gobert. But yeah, it doesn't look so good. I think the thing that I'm most proud of, speaking of the Wolves, is like I message every group chat that hasn't blocked me saying the Blazers are going to be a better team than the Wolves this year. And you can roll your eyes because they're my team and I know how it looks. But they're deeper. I mean, the Wolves sacrificed so much depth, which, usually, is at least most important in the regular season. And without Damian Lillard, the Blazers are just a really exciting team. They're not a contender. They're not even close to a contender. My dad's texting me 1977 every time they win a game. It scares the shit out of me. I'm worried about his well-being. But, they're better than the Jazz. They're better than the number 1 seed in the West right now.
Yeah.
They're definitely more legit than the Jazz. And like, I think that it would be really, really awesome if the Blazers could steal a 6 seed or above and not have to beat a really good team to be in the playoffs. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. I was right about the depth. Anthony's taken another step. He's just solidified himself as an absolutely elite shooter. And yeah, Shaedon Sharpe, what is there to say?
Yeah.
God allows few children on this earth to move the way that Shaedon Sharpe just naturally moves around a basketball court. He looks like he was engineered in a lab to like play the wing position in the NBA. And he still might be J.R. Smith. And yet there are very few guys who would be drafted above him if we did a redraft tonight. And so it's an exciting time to be a Blazers fan. I told you so. Fuck you, Blazers haters, aka every reputable basketball media source I follow. Yeah. And then what else did I have? Oh, I said Siakam. I had him in my top 20. You told me it was a little bit high. another guy like Mitchell who just gets better every year. And so like I just feel good betting on him to take a step every season that he isn't like, on the wrong side of 30. Get that one out of the way. I mean, Siakam's been awesome. And then my last one that I wrote down was the Kings suck. It was really pissing me off. I mean, the Kings could still make the play-in. It's so messy, that part of the standings in the West. I'm not writing them off for, the 10 seed, but it just pissed me off how much credit the Kings were getting for the roster they put together heading into this year. They're still the Kings. I don't see anything very different from last year. Love Kevin Huerter, but he's not moving the needle in any crazy fashion. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I still don't really understand the Kings. I don't have a great handle on exactly how good they are. Definitely to this point, we'll give a cap tip on the Blazers. I had them finishing 10th in the West, which in retrospect is not looking good. I definitely underrated their wing rotation, which I think is probably the best it's been in the sort of, I guess, since they had like Wes Matthews and Nick Batum. This is probably the best set of wings between Hart, Grant, Little, Sharp that they've had. And Gary Payton hasn't even played yet, and he was a pretty prized offseason pickup for them. And Dame's missed some games, and Nurk has missed some games. They just kind of keep grinding.
Poor man Siakam of the West, Jeremy Grant, another guy who just like adds something to his bag every year, it seems. And like his shot creation has really surprised me. It's not like I watched a ton of him in Detroit. And it was harder to credit him for what he can do on a team that was losing so many games in a role that he's underqualified for. But he's really fun, easy to root for. I'm surprised by the spice he has off the dribble. And Blazers fans are really in love with our front office right now, because it feels like we went from a team with no punch, no real athleticism, electricity at the wing position, and like a year later, we feel like an athletic team. We just have a lot of live young bodies that can tire down veteran teams on the nights that, Dame needs to rest, because he clearly isn't a guy who's going to be playing 70 games every year of his career anymore.
Right. So that was Homer Corner. Coming up now, well, one of my other I told yous, which I'm not positive I want to like say I told you yet, but I was pretty skeptical on Dallas coming into the season. I thought they would really regret losing Brunson. And Brunson has definitely made the Knicks better, to the point that the Knicks are now just a perfectly average team with really no real pathway of getting dramatically better or worse, but they will win no fewer than 37 games and no more than 43.
And a lot of good memes. A lot of good memes in the process. A lot of good memes.
Dallas, on the other hand, it's just, I mean, we haven't seen this sort of one guy carrying a team since the days of James Harden in Houston and Russell Westbrook in Oklahoma City to this level that Luka is being asked to carry Dallas right now.
How about Luka in the playoffs last year?
I mean, he still at least had Brunson, who, was able to win 2 games in the first round without him against the Jazz.
Agreed. But when we reached, rounds 2, 3, I mean, conference finals especially, Brunson faded. We both talked about how Dorian Finney-Smith was their second best player against the Suns. I love Brunson, but that's more of a testament to DFS. I don't know. I agree with that Russillo doctrine of like, it's hard to expect a title run from one of these heliocentric teams. And at the same time, like Luka was their world last year and they came damn close to the finals.
Yeah. I worry about them more in the regular season, honestly. Like in the playoffs, they're still going to be a team that no one wants to play, because Luka with 4 shooters is just a team that can drop 130 on you kind of any given night. And if they happen to get hot 4 games in a series, you're screwed. Phoenix saw that last year, even though they were the superior team. But that's just something I'm keeping an eye on. And another one I was ready to say I told you about before they've dropped a couple games lately is the Pelicans being a playoff contender. But now they're certainly going to be in the playoffs. I think they've distinguished themselves, I think, as one of the best 8 teams in the West. But because
they're 8th right now.
there's some consistency issues. There's some defense issues. They've had some injuries as well, but they lost to Portland last night without Dame or Nurkic in a game where Zion was really hunted defensively at the end of the game, which I'm sure would made you doubly happy.
Yeah,
But that's just what I'm monitoring.
Zion's not the best player on his team, but that's besides the point.
No,
For the record, I don't think that the Blazers are that far away from the Pelicans. I think that they're probably pretty
no.
similar range this year.
Yeah.
I actually, yeah, and I might be more scared of just like the matchup issues that the Pelicans create. So I'm not here to rain on your Pelicans parade. But I still think they're a couple of years away from serious contention. I think you'd probably agree.
Yeah.
But I'm less worried about the Mavs than you are. They're 6-5. I think they have like a top 3 or 4 point differential in the West.
Although they beat the Grizzlies by like 40, so it is a little bit skewed by that game.
Yeah, I know. Point differential means nothing, but I'll use it to make a point I feel passionate about. Yeah, I don't know. The Brunson loss is huge. You need guys who can release some pressure from that, the Luka-less valve when he's not on the floor or when Luka needs to rest. Like they don't have a lot of guys to give the ball and say like, go get us a bucket, create something for someone else. Christian Wood. I'm still not convinced that he's, in their closing 5 in a meaningful playoff game. And Tim Hardaway is just not nearly as good as Jalen Brunson. So he's back,
Yeah.
but that void isn't filled. So maybe they're a deal away at the deadline from taking a step into that group of more serious contenders. But right now, I'm not going to worry about the Mavs just yet because they have a top 2 guy in the world.
Yeah. I've got one more that's sort of a combination of a few draft ones. Just a couple of my draft predictions, which I think look good so far. One is Paolo being in a league of his own as a prospect at the top, although Mathurin is making a strong push for needing to be in that tier as well. But I think just physically coming in, Paolo was just and how polished his game was. Paolo was so far ahead of everyone else in this draft class. And then dovetailing off of that, I really was not very high on Jabari Smith, and I kind of wish in retrospect that I had faded him a little bit more. But I sort of wonder now already, Paolo looks better. Chet hasn't played yet, so you can't say. Mathurin's certainly been better to this point. Ivy, I think, has looked more impressive to this point. And Jabari is probably not the best situation for his skill set in Houston, but definitely some concerns there, I think.
All right. Well, you just dipped into our next segment.
Yeah.
Which we're gonna get right into now. We're calling this How Many? Max just came up with a list of questions. I answered most of them. A couple of them I just wanted him to fuck off. And so we're gonna get into those right now. We're like an average of 12 games into the season, depending on who you root for. Max, ask your first how many.
Dovetailing off that, were there to be a redraft today, how many players would be drafted ahead of Jabari Smith?
Yeah. Let's start there. And I have some spice here. I just wrote, I'm only ready to say one, Paolo. We are, barely double-digit games into Jabari Smith's career. He's under 30% from threes, averaging like 10, 6, and very few assists. And he's definitely had some defensive flashes. I only really watched the first couple of games for the Rockets, so I'm not going to talk out of my ass here, but I was really impressed by early rookie defensive flashes. I think that his frame just looks like it's going to be able to support so much weight, and he can already do some rim protection for them. Their team sucks. I saw people tweeting do you think Jabari Smith misses the Auburn guards? Which the whole joke during his college career was that he didn't have guards that could feed him the way he deserved to be fed. The Rockets are the worst team in the league, and I'm just not ready to start panicking about Jabari Smith. But would I be stressed out if I were a Rockets fan? Of course. But I had him at number 1. I've listed the reasons why, and just give the kid some time. Let's get some sample size before we decide that he's an offensively limited prospect.
That's fair.
And then Paolo's been an all-star through 12 games, so I don't need to explain why he's there.
Yeah. Remind me, did you have Paolo or Jabari 1 in the draft?
I had Jabari.
Okay.
But who are the candidates to put above Jabari? I guess, like you said, Paolo, obviously.
Mathurin,
obviously. Shaden, just for the physical ceiling. That's not a homer take. I mean, Jeremy Sohan, I don't think so, but Spurs fans are excited about the defensive potential.
I mean, Well, you could say Chet, but he hasn't played yet, so
Chet,
it's hard to say.
I think a lot of people would say Chet right now.
Yeah, and you
Based
could say
on
Ivy.
preseason. Yeah. I wouldn't come close to saying Ivy. I understand Chet just because he was so electric in preseason. But you know, the injury is another thing. Maybe I don't know. I don't know how much we're worrying about Chet physically yet. I mean, I am, but you sheep. I don't know about you guys yet. Okay,
Yeah,
but yeah. So
Jabari. For the
I said
record,
one guy. How many guys would you take tonight before Jabari Smith if you could redraft?
I'd take Paolo, Chet, Matherin, um, for sure, and then I think I would think very hard about Ivy and Sharp.
Mm-hmm. Would you take Sharp or Ivy right now?
Probably Ivy. I've been very impressed with what I've seen from Ivy. His physical tools are just kind of top tier.
Yeah. Yeah, he's as physically elite as Shaden, but Shaden's bigger, and I just like Shaden's shooting, so I'd probably take him. But I'm not taking Shaden above Jabari, so I'm not that much of a homer.
Yeah, we don't have to spend the whole episode talking about Jabari Smith, although for the record, he does have the lowest true shooting percentage in the league for
Yeah,
anyone with like.
yeah, and his PER is like under 7.
Yes.
It's like makes RJ Barrett look like Giannis. Okay.
Yeah. Give
Sorry.
me another how many from the ones that I
Yeah.
sent you.
Okay, so now I'm just gonna go in order of the list that you sent me. How many teams can make the conference finals? Start with the number and then explain.
I say 8. This is in both
Damn.
conferences. All right. So in the West, I have 5.
Interesting.
Um, Phoenix, I think you have to put them in there. Denver for sure. I'm still gonna give the Clippers and the Warriors the benefit of the doubt, and Memphis. I think it's those 5.
Okay. Yeah, I have 8 total as well, but I had 6 in the West.
Who was your 6th?
I put the Mavs
Okay.
out of respect for Luka's greatness. I
Yeah.
just again, they're 6 and 5. I'm not writing off Luka. His usage will only go up in the playoffs, and his efficiency has never wavered. And there's just a world where we enter next season saying Luka's the best player on earth. I think it's going to be Giannis. Right now it's Giannis, but Luka's the only guy right now really putting pressure on Giannis. So yeah, I can't write off the Mavs. I had them as the 6th team. In the East, I had only 2 teams, the Bucks and the Celtics, who I think are the 2 best teams in the league.
Yes.
The 2 teams that I'd least want to play in the playoffs, regardless of matchup. But that's boring because everyone knows they're far and away the best teams in the East. So if you force me into the next tier, you know, maybe Tatum gets hurt, maybe Giannis has his first significant injury, and we have to dip into the next tier. I would in this order, I would go Raptors, Cavs, Hawks, and then I threw in the Heat. They're 5 and 7, but like they just every year the Heat tell us to respect them more, and they haven't been healthy. So yeah.
Yeah, my 3rd in the East was Cleveland. I think that I think the West is much more jumbled. I think in the East we're going to see the real teams separate from the pack a little bit quicker. Because in the West, I think everyone outside of, well, we'll get to this question in a second, but in the West, I think everyone outside of Denver and Phoenix has a chance to be in the play-in.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
Yeah, but in the East, I think I think Milwaukee and Boston are the 2 best teams in the league. I agree. But I think Cleveland, just with sort of the 2 explosive scoring options in the backcourt that they have, and then the 2 just like pterodactyl level bigs that they have to clean up things on the back end, and their ability to shoot the ball. Kevin Love's been playing really well. I think he should be the front runner for 6th man of the year personally. I was looking at the odds the other day, and he's like not even close to the top of the list for 6th man of the year odds, which kind of shocked me. Because guys like Poole and some of the other betting favorites just haven't gotten off to great starts. But yeah, so those were the 8 I settled on. As we said before, I'm a little bit more tepid on Dallas with how the rest of the West is this year. And I think they have a good chance of being in the play-in. Going from the play-in to the conference finals is pretty tough.
Yeah. Someone's going to get hurt. So, you know, or, you know, someone gets hurt temporarily and the Bucks and Celtics have to play again in the second round. Right. I see the argument for the Cavs. I just want to see a couple dozen more games before I'm putting them in that group. I think if everyone stayed healthy, I'd be more surprised by the Cavs making it in the East than I would be Luka dragging the Mavs somehow in the West.
Yeah.
Just a best player argument, playoffs, rotations get smaller, etc. But we're pretty close there. All right. The next question you asked me was how many first-time All-Stars? Hit me.
So I said 3 or 4, and I think the West is more likely to have them. So in the West, I think you can almost write in pen Desmond Bane and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at this point. Desmond Bane, for those who don't know, on Memphis is averaging close to 30 points a game.
Wait, no, he's not.
Sorry, 25 points a game. Close to 30 points a game over his last 10.
Yeah.
But he's at essentially 25, 5 and 5. He's shooting 46% from 3, 90% from the field. He's raised his shooting volume and shooting efficiency this year. He's doing more off the dribble. He's went from 3 assists to 5 assists. Like every part of his game has just gotten better. And he's going to be on a very good team in Memphis, which always, helps push you into the All-Star game. They're going to be a team near the top of the standings where coaches are like, we got to have 2 All-Stars from this team. So, and he deserves it otherwise.
He also just has this transition confidence that guys that come to mind, like Josh Hart and Tyrese Maxey, like these guys who just get the ball maybe on a long rebound and just go. And the ball's on a string. They might not have the best handles in the league, but they just have a very special knack for getting to the rim and not losing it, not getting their shot blocked, getting a shot or a foul in transition. Desmond Bane has that one-man fast break quality to his game, 2K badge, so to speak. So I'm with you. I wrote that there are only 2 first-time All-Stars, and it's those 2 guys in the West. Everyone else, I need more time. Guys like Keldon, it really depends on how many games some of these mediocre teams win. So I'm locking in SGA and Bane because they are just fucking amazing. But after that, I think Jeremy Sohan's the only name I'm confident about.
Yeah, I said 3 just because there were a lot of guys I had question marks next to, and I was like, it feels like one of these guys will sneak in. Yeah, for SGA, he's averaging almost 32 points a game, 4.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 54% from the field, 95% from the free throw line. His PER is close to 30.
Told you so.
I had him above awesome.
James Harden. I had him above Harden.
I also did not know his full name was Shavonte. That's kind of cool.
No way.
But yeah, unless the basketball reference is talking out its ass. But he's been insane. That OKC team is, as Zach Lowe would say, frisky. On any given night, they will push a team where there's just kind of no nights off, honestly, for almost every team in the league, unless you're playing the Lakers.
And Poku hasn't even gotten going. And I don't even say that as a joke.
Yeah.
I drafted Poku in all my fantasy leagues and expected him to have better counting stats to this point. Because in garbage games at the end of last season, he was actually tearing shit up and getting an occasional triple-double. So, Chet's out. We're still waiting for the Jalen Williams explosion. It's coming.
It's coming.
Frisky OKC team. Okay.
Yeah, forgot to mention him above Jabari too.
Exactly.
But some other names that I had question marks next to. Everyone's talking about Lauri Markkanen and the Utah Jazz. I just can't believe that that's going to hold up. But if it does, he has a chance. Certainly has an argument to make it.
Don't even start.
Do you think Anthony Simons has a chance to make it if the Blazers are like top 3 in the West?
He has a chance, but I would take the under.
Okay.
And when in doubt, especially with the fan vote, like legacy really tends to win out. And so that's why I can't pencil in guys with great stats like Anthony, because I think you have to be like overwhelmingly great to break in to the canon of NBA stars that rake in votes. And that's what SGA, Halliburton has all-star stats, but I don't think his team's going to win enough. And I don't think that guys are voting for Halliburton over some of the established names and faces that they want to see at All-Star weekend. So it has nothing to do with how good guys like Halliburton are. But yeah.
Paolo's another one I thought of in the East. Like
totally.
It's very rare for rookies to make the All-Star team, but for someone who has really stepped on the scene and just stepped into 24 and 8
Yeah.
as quickly as he has,
Yeah.
I could see him getting a little bit of a push to make it. I just think Orlando's probably going to suck.
But being a top tier league pass guy, doesn't make you an all-star. I didn't write in Paolo because he has another guy who has the all-star numbers, but his team sucks. Not
Yeah.
not in the league pass way, but
Cade
I,
also.
I think their win total will be a 0 all-star win total.
Yeah. Same with the Pistons and Cade, I think.
Yeah, exactly. But Cade's stats aren't even close to Paolo's right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Jalen Brunson, probably not, but maybe if
Fuck
the
off.
Knicks are like
Next.
okay.
Next.
All right. Which one do you want to do next?
You asked me how many teams are worse than the Lakers. I wrote, fuck you for asking. This is every episode I mark explicit, but this one's actually explicit. How many teams did you say are better than the Lakers? I didn't want to think about it because it means the end of the early part of my life if LeBron has like no more fun seasons left. Yes, the Lakers suck. There are only a few teams in the league that are worse than them. How many are there specifically?
I think there are 4 teams in the league that are for sure worse than the Lakers. There are some that may fall under them, and if they, trade Russell Westbrook for Buddy Hield and Miles Turner, or Mike Conley and Malik Beasley and Jordan Clarkson, they'll get better. I mean, Houston's the worst team in the league. Charlotte's worse than them. San Antonio's worse than them. Detroit, I think Orlando may settle into being worse than them. So I'd say 4 or 5. But
yeah,
if they do nothing and they just stay as they are right now, they will end up with a top 5 lottery spot.
Agreed. Okay. How many teams could be in the play-in? My answer is 20.
Yeah, I have 19.
Yeah. In the East, I said on the good side, everyone except Bucks, Celtics, Cavs. Because the Cavs have already shown without half of their star backcourt, they're still really good. And then at the bottom, I said the Hornets, the Magic, and the Pistons are not going to make the plan. In the West, I said everyone except Suns, Nuggets. Okay, I wrote Cavs again. So who did I mean? I meant Grizzlies. Sorry, Suns, Nuggets, and Grizzlies. And then on the downside, Rockets and Thunder. So 20 teams total could logically make the play in my mind.
In the East, I think Boston, Cleveland, Milwaukee are clear of it, and I think Portland. Sorry, I think Orlando, Detroit, and Charlotte won't sniff it. The other 9 all in play, and in the West, Phoenix and Denver and Memphis, I think, are going to be above it, and then Houston, OKC, San Antonio.
Okay, so, you went San Antonio. Yeah. I wasn't counting San Antonio out because they're trying to win games. How many players in MVP conversation?
Yes, I think 5. I think there's a very clear top 5.
Yes.
Giannis, Booker, in no particular order. Giannis, Booker, Tatum, Donovan Mitchell, and
what?
Jokic. That was my 5.
This isn't a 12 games in MVP. This is who is going to be in the MVP conversation at the conclusion of the 82nd game.
Oh, well, this is how many players are in the MVP conversation right now. Sorry, I forgot Doncic. It was not Jokic, it was Doncic.
If we're talking now, then yeah, Donovan Mitchell has to be in it. But I misinterpreted. I thought you were asking like how many guys are, name a group that you're certain the MVP will come from.
And I can answer that as well.
And I put down also 5 guys: Giannis, Luka, Tatum, Ja, Booker.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I should have I couldn't include Jokic just because the back-to-back. But
yeah.
But like Jokic is always at an MVP level. His point totals are down now. I think maybe because he has more guys to pass to. But yeah, the Joker is the Joker.
Yeah, he's leading the league in true shooting percentage for or not quite, but actually Steph is above him. Yeah. Steph has actually been incredible. It's just the rest of the team has sucked.
That's been ridiculous, which is actually encouraging because he's supposed to be not doing what he's still doing in his career. Also, Jokic is shooting 25% from 3. So like he's going to get back up toward 25 points a game. He's like like 21 or 22 right now.
I would guess that pretty quickly it'll turn into a 3-man race though between Giannis, Luka, and Tatum, I think is how it's going to shake out.
Yeah. I think Ja is here to stay. It's hard for me to imagine a world where Devin Booker is the MVP. He's just like
Yeah.
he's forever an ancillary, like great star in my mind. But he's been awesome. Okay. The next question you asked me was it was the Jabari Smith one. We did that. How many more Warriors games if they keep playing at this level? How many more games until you're worried that they are not a contender?
I think if we get to the 20 game mark in the season, so like not that far away, like maybe 10 more games
Yeah.
of, because they've probably played like 12 to this point. They're like, oh no, they're 4-7, I think. So
Yeah.
if we get to like the 2022 game mark and they're still, what would that be, like 8-14 or something like that, and they're not showing any signs of non all five starters lineups being good, then you guys think you should really start to be worried, because even if, when you get into the playoffs, you can rely heavily on the guys are good. If they have to claw their way from the play-in to trying to get to the conference finals or the finals, just history has shown that's not an easy or effective way to try to win the title. Pretty much you have to
Yeah.
be a top 3 or 4 seed to make the finals.
It's a nuanced question, Max, because is it this iteration of the Warriors? Because if they play several more games and they're at like this win percentage, they have plenty of deals that they can make. And it doesn't seem like they're the kind of front office that will lose an important trade. At least they haven't recently. So whether it's Draymond or the young guys, if they need to mix things up to get back in the title race, they will do that. They might not say that post game yet, but they will. And yeah, I put 20 games because I just have that much faith in their infrastructure. Like I need to see them like midway through the season, basically midway through the year before I'm gonna say like this just isn't working. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. If there had been no Draymond punch, I think we'd probably say like give us 35 more games.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy because when you think of like the Warriors dynasty from the 2010s, and then they have these down years where they reload with young players, and then they like come back in a big way last year. But really, it doesn't look like, I mean, none of those young players are actually contributing to their success. Like Moody at least might be a useful player, but at this point, Wiseman is maybe the most damaging rotation player in the NBA. And I mean, I've never been a huge fan of his game. I just think the
He is
processing
not a
speed,
wise man on the defensive end.
the processing speed on the court just isn't there in terms of mentally seeing where the next pass is, seeing the open space to cut to. Everything just kind of feels a step late. And I don't think that's really something you learn. I think you you call it feel for the game. I think that's really something you either have or you don't. You can kind of improve it if it's there a little bit, but I just don't have that much faith with that. And Kuminga has also not been as good this year, partially being played out of position because he's playing next to Wiseman at times.
Yeah.
But
I just want Kuminga to keep disappointing and like somehow end up a Blazer. We just get like this 6'9", like, an incredibly talented piece of Play-Doh to try to turn into what he looked like he could be in his rookie season.
I will say, if all the young players just aren't useful, it does make the decision a lot easier to bring Draymond back and just like forego the young guys, because if they aren't going to help you contend into the future, there's no reason to invest a ton of money in them.
Yeah. I've thought a lot about just like how much offensive intelligence Jordan Poole has gleaned from Steph. Like there's no way Jordan Poole has this sexy and offensive repertoire if he doesn't like grow up as a pro next to Steph. He just has a level of creativity that like Jordan Poole has. And he's actually disappointed based on I think what people expected him to do this year. Like he's had a slow start, but he still just has such a deep bag. And that's and I think that's what, and same thing has happened to Anthony Simons playing alongside Dame. Like you just learn things from these genius guards. It worries me that Wiseman defensively, like especially with a year to watch Draymond, hasn't had some of that same learning curve. Because Draymond is sort of the Dame or Steph of defense, and still Wiseman looks like he's like, if Marcus Gasol is a 10 in processing speed, like Wiseman is, he's close to 0.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully they don't, spend the rest of their lives wondering what if LaMelo was on our team. Yeah. Okay. The next question was, how many Pels are the third best player on the Lakers? I wrote, fuck you again.
I knew this would be a fuck you question.
Yeah, we get it. The Lakers suck. What was your answer?
My answer was 7.
Okay.
I can run it. We've talked a lot about the Pelicans and Lakers so far, but I can run through it real quick.
Yeah, just give me the list.
This is not counting Victor Wembanyama, by the way. But we might be on the Pelicans next season. Yeah. But CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Zion obviously is 3. Jonas, definitely. I think Larry Nance would be the third best player on the Lakers. I think Herb Jones would be the third best player, and I think Trey Murphy would be the third best player.
Oh, no doubt.
Trey Murphy's been awesome so far.
Would you rather have Alvarado or Beverly for this season?
I really thought about Alvarado as well.
Yeah.
He might be. I don't know who the third best player on the Lakers is. It's probably like
it's
Austin
Lonnie.
Reeves.
It's been Lonnie, I think.
Yeah, Lonnie's had some good games. And Russ off the bench has certainly been their third best player. He just makes no sense with the way that they're trying to play. I
thought a more interesting question was like, how many guys would be the best or second best player on the Lakers?
Yeah.
Okay. How many more Cade Cunningham games before you're worried about his shooting efficiency? You asked me this question. I randomly threw down 30 games. I don't know. I usually basketball efficiency, like guys are pretty consistent. It isn't like baseball where you draft prime Ryan Braun and he hits 230 and you're like, what the fuck? Usually good shooters are good shooters throughout their prime, and you have in-season slumps, but the overall numbers stay the same. So yeah, I'm worried about the fact that he's under 30% from 3. But he's an amazing passer. He's a solid defender. He's a good rebounder. And, he's like around 26-6 right now. I'm at least comforted by the fact that Cade's had a disappointing start to the year and he's a 26-6 guy. But give me another half of the season before I worry that he isn't a really solid shooter.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was actually more generous with it. I thought I would give it basically till the end of the year. Or start of next year if he's still looking inefficient. But that might also be because you think he's going to be like an MVP candidate type of player, and I think he'll be like, an all-star a few times.
I had him. I mean, it's also like the NBA has more top 25 players than ever before.
Yes.
And I picked Cade to be a top 25 guy. So obviously so far that looks terrible. But small sample size. His shot is so clean. Like, I think he's a great shooter because I have such absurd expectations for him. Yeah, that's why I think I was a little bit more worried. Like, if he's who I think he is, he's going to figure this thing out pretty quickly. But that's interesting.
Yeah.
How many Suns wins for you to consider them the favorite in the West?
This was probably the favorite question that I came up with because
I like it.
Just like early in the year, the Suns look awesome again. And everyone, including me, thought they would probably slide back to the pack a little bit, but it looks like they'll probably be the 1 or 2 seed in the West again. I said they would have to win 70 games for me to consider them the favorite in the West.
Yeah, that was my thought experiment. Okay, they go 70-12. Am I picking them over a 55 win Grizzlies team? And the answer is no. I actually wrote the limit does not exist because DeAndre Ayton did not talk to Monty Williams between Game 7 and the start of training camp. That is crazy. The whole world knows it. The talk shows have talked about it, but it's just still too weird. And it's obviously impressive that they just continue to be such an awesome regular season team. How the hell could I pick them under any circumstance? I mean, they were an insanely good regular season team last year. So if they win a few more games this year, that takes them to a historically good regular season level, I'm going to pick them. The answer is no. The Suns, I was on the wrong side for 2 straight years. I picked them to beat the Bucks 2 years ago, and I picked them to beat. I think I picked a repeat finals last year. I picked them to beat the Bucks 2 years in a row, and they let me down 2 years in a row. And I will not
pick it again this year.
I will most certainly not pick them a third year in a row. So yeah, limit does not exist for me, but I think 70's the good over under.
Yeah.
How many players from our preseason top 11 have Ja Morant and Jason Tatum passed?
For a refresher, I had Ja sitting at 11 and Tatum sitting at 9. Let's do Tatum first. I think I would have him already as a comfortable 6, maybe 5. The real debate is between him and Durant still for me.
This wasn't a fuck you, but this was like an I don't want to do it yet. I just don't want to do it yet. I said a bunch. I wrote down probably a bunch. Like obviously, like Tatum's been better than LeBron. He's been better than Durant. I guess, yeah, you said. Kawhi still hasn't returned from injury as far as I'm concerned. Because we saw him for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. The case with LeBron, Kawhi, and Durant was always like a ceiling case where, in the regular season, they're probably not close to the top. Well, they're close, but they
don't have the young legs.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like if you get into a playoff series and you have one of those guys on your team, you feel really good about having the best player in the series.
Yeah.
The one which I think Tatum may be passing, which personally I don't love because I don't like Boston and I really like Joel Embiid, is Joel Embiid. I'm surprised you didn't bring this up and told you so, that Philly would just be like nowhere near as good as everyone thought they were going to be.
Yeah, I just thought that I thought that would be a little unfair because Philly was so polarizing. I feel like you were either like Kevin Pelton picking them to win the finals, or you were like, a Nets fan or a Rockets fan. And you were like, are you fucking kidding me? Like they have no chance.
Yeah, I've been really discouraged with how Embiid has started this season.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's from an off-season injury, but he just does not look like he's still getting numbers. Like I don't have his raw numbers in front of me, but I'm sure it's like 25 and 12, but
not good.
Just he seems like he's turning it over more. He's moving a lot slower, both like end to end, and then just labored. He's settling for threes. He looks labored, yeah. And yeah, so I would already be comfortable with putting Tatum over him. Kawhi, we just haven't really seen much of him. LeBron's been kind of in and out and hurt. For the regular season, I'd rather have Tatum, but
I'm a little bit worried about Embiid. I think we all assumed that his prime would end earlier than a lot of guys because of the injury history, because of the size. I think that I'm more worried about that he's just like mentally checked out after seeing like the way things look and feel with the makeup of this roster, like bringing in Culture King, PJ Tucker, the moves they made in the offseason that a lot of people like just haven't been enough to shift the tone. So yeah, I think, and I also feel like I unfairly penalized Tatum for some of his inefficient shooting late in last year's playoffs in the finals against the Bucks. Obviously he had that legendary game 6 against the Bucks, but I don't know. It's not like he had a 2011 LeBron performance. So I think that I held that against him a little bit, just that like Steph was so much better than him in the finals.
Yeah.
He's definitely knocking on the top 5 door, and I just want to see several more games before I parse that one out in my head.
Yeah, and he's averaging 31 points a game on career best efficiency.
Yeah.
His turnovers have come down just a tiny bit, but yeah, he looks really good. And Ja looks incredible.
Yeah. Ja, I'm just a little bit more worried about because I don't think he's ever going to be a great defender, and I just worry about his body holding up in the playoffs. So like there are guys at his level or maybe a tiny bit below his level that I might put above him in like my top 10 players rankings, which at the end of the day are just like, who do I want leading my group, in a playoff game 7. the way Ja plays, I mean, he was phenomenal against the Warriors, and then he got hurt because he hits the deck really hard a lot of times. So yeah, but still another guy who's playing at a top 5 caliber. So we'll see. Let's give them more
Also,
time.
also shooting 45% from three is
Yeah,
Ja on
yeah,
almost 5 attempts a game. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on, because if that becomes a consistent weapon for him, there's absolutely no way to defend him.
yeah.
So yeah, I'd be
And
comfortable
maybe the
sliding him
best,
up a
and
couple
maybe the
spots.
best passer in the league too.
He's up there. I mean, well, I mean, no, Jokic is the best passer in the league, I'd say, but
Okay.
Ja's he's in that, that first group, I'd say.
Do you want to get into a pound for pound argument? Because I don't know. Jaws in that conversation. Okay. The last question you asked me, which I refuse to answer. How many teams do I understand? Don't I feel like SpongeBob when he's like the waiter episode, they ask him what his name is and he explodes because he's brainwashed himself to become the world's best waiter. Don't do this to me. My brain will split in half. I don't know how many teams I understand yet.
All right. Well, I'll tell you how many teams I think I understand. I think there's the good ones, which I think, I mean, Milwaukee, I think is pretty easy to understand. Giannis is great.
Yeah.
If they just have two reliable bench players in the playoffs, they're going to be great. Boston, very easy to understand. They're the same team as last year. They just added Malcolm Brogdon. It doesn't seem like the coaching thing has affected them at all, with having their coach resign right before the season, or sorry, get suspended right before the season. Phoenix, I think I understand. They're going to win a lot of regular season games, and no one's going to be that scared to see them in the playoffs. Memphis, I think I understand as well. They're going to try really hard, win a lot of regular season games. And, second round is probably the most likely outcome for them.
The only team that I'm sure I understand right now is Brooklyn.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it in Brooklyn, and I've seen enough.
Yeah. And then there's the bad ones like Houston, Detroit, Orlando, Charlotte, San Antonio. I'm pretty sure I know who those teams are. And the Lakers. I think I understand who the Lakers are unless they trade for someone.
Yeah.
But all that goes to say, I think I understand 9 teams. There's 21, which I'm still kind of trying to wrap my arms around. And that's really the thing that stood out to me the most from these first few weeks of the season, is just, you think like a team's looking good, it wins a couple games in a row, and then it loses to like Indiana or San Antonio
3-point
or
variance.
Portland. It's 3-point variance. It's the depth of talent being so great that these lower, sort of perceived lower level teams who play with a ton of energy, if you don't come out and match them, they're going to beat you. There just aren't a ton of like, going through the schedule, just like, yeah, we'll win that one. We'll win that one. That's just kind of not the case with how balanced a lot of the talent is around the league. And I do think that's going to, and has already led to, a much more intense level of play earlier in the season than we've seen in years past, because I think once we get to like the 25 game mark, there's going to be a lot of teams that sort of look around and say, damn, we're like firmly in the play-in right now, and those top 3 teams in our conference are getting further and further away. Like, we really have to kind of put the foot down a little bit to try to get out of this play-in mix and get like a real playoff spot. So
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see how some of those races shake out.
I am too. Does Ben Simmons need to go to MSG? Does Kyrie hate Jews? We're going to talk about all that and more soon.